All right, Rabosai. Sorry. All right, Rabosai, good morning, a good Chodesh to everyone. Incredible way to begin Chodesh Elul with a beautiful Daf Masechah Succah. Begin by thanking our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Elul, Avram and Shane D. Kelman, for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Drushos this month in memory of their parents. And Meretz Hashem, may the Neshamas have an Aliyah and the family a Nechama. We thank our week of learning sponsors, Shmuel and Shira Artman, in honor of the birth of a baby girl to Jessie and Rivka Meirovitz. We thank the Artmans for the sponsorship, and Mazel Tov to the Meirovitzes on the birth of Yakira Bela. Should be Zochel Agad LaTorah LeChuppah, Ula Meisin Tovim. Well, so with that, let us begin. We have a very exciting daf ahead of us today. A lot to do, not a lot of time to do it in. Also, I made copies. There's a great sefer that I want to recommend. I'm actually going to see maybe if we can get it in bulk. It's called the Lulav and Esrog Handbook. This is not an infomercial. I just want to point out, I received no proceeds or royalties from the sale of this particular book. But this happens to be, it's a great digest of the halachos of Daled Minim. It's an article publication, short, concise, English, pictures, everything. I made for you today a copy of the section on Lulav. I don't know if I made enough copies for everyone. I'm going to try to get, and for those who are joining us online, I'm going to get someone to make a good color PDF of it, and Amir Hashem send it out on WhatsApp. Also, we'll be using this over the next couple of days, the next couple of sugyas, but you're going to see it's incredibly helpful. All right, so with that, let us begin. We really have an exciting, and I also want to mention that what I'm going to try to do is, because all of these sugyas are really interesting halakha l'maisa sugyas. So what I'm going to try to do is sometime in the next couple of weeks to schedule a shir, not a Daf Yomi shir, an independent halakha shir on the halakha l'maisa of Daled Minim. And the goal of that shir will be, we're just going to go through all of the bottom line halachas. What makes a lulav kosher, what makes a lulav pasal, hadassim, aravas, esrogim. And the Meretz Hashem, then my hope is, and then we'll finally get to the daf, is that when we do the Lulav and Esrog sale this year, we'll have a special Daf Yomi hour where we can mamish go through the sugyas, lemaisa with the Daled Minim. So very exciting times ahead of us, Meretz Hashem, as you go into the months ahead. Also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Lamed Beis. And I will say, what a beautiful zechus that on Rosh Chodesh Elul we get to do Daf Leiv. Daf Lamed Beis, because the Gemara says Rachmana Liba Boy. The only thing the Ribono Shel Olam wants of us is our heart. That's it. He doesn't expect us to be perfect. He doesn't even expect us to be consistent. All he expects of us is that whatever we do in this world, we put our leiv into it. Put your heart into it, and that's enough. So mamish, what an incredible thing. Daf Leiv, Daf Lamed Beis on Rosh Chodesh Elul. So incredible. But we're actually starting from Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, but it's better to say we're starting from Lamed Beis. Good. So let's begin. We're picking up in Meretz Hashem Lamed Aleph Amud Beis 31b. We left off 4 lines up from the bottom. Shal asher v'shal irani dacha. So the Mishnah said you cannot use a lulav of an Asherah or of an irani dachas. Remember again, we're familiar with both of these concepts. An Asherah was a tree worshipped for idolatry purposes. Irani dachas was a city which was condemned because the inhabitants worshipped avodah zarah. So it says the Gemara, V'shel Asherah pasul. Is that true? That the lulav from an Asherah tree is pasul? V'ha'amar Rava said, lulav shel avodah zarah lo yital. You should not use a lulav of avodah zarah. Now, here's what's interesting about this. Take a look at Rashi. What is a lulav of avodah zarah? What is that? So Rashi says, lulav shel avodah zarah, sheshimshu bo la'avodah zarah, lechabed lefanei karka. So, first example Rashi gives is a lulav that was used in, let's say, a house of idolatry to clean the house of idolatry. So again, you have cleaning supplies that are part of a house of avodah zarah. So the broom which is used to clean the house of avodah zarah takes on an avodah zarah identity as well. Inam, the other possibility is, Rashi says, shavodasa belulav lahavir lefana ulazarka. The other possibility is that no, the lulav itself is either part of the way you worship the particular avodah zarah. Either you wave it in front of the avodah zarah, you throw it in front of the avodah zarah. So 2 different possibilities. Either A, it's used to clean the house of the avodah zarah like a broom, or it's actually used in a service. So the Gemara says, "V'amarav lulav shel avodah zarah lo yitol." Ideally, you shouldn't use a lulav which was used in a house of avodah zarah. V'im natal, but if you took it, kosher. It works. Shabbos say, what do you see from here? You see from here that Allah Lamaisa, although ideally you shouldn't use the lulav of avodah zarah, if you did, it works. So how does that stem with the Mishnah that says you shouldn't use the lulav of avodah zarah at all? To which the Gemara says, hacha ba'ashera de Moshe askinon. The Mishnah is talking about the avodah zarah, the Asherah, which existed at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Ba'ashera de Moshe, osam shahayu b'shas kibush Eretz Yisrael. The Mishnah is referring to avodah zarah, which was in existence at the time that Eretz Yisrael was conquered. Shetzrichan hakosov sreifa kidechsiv, v'asherehem tisrafun ba'ish, v'lulav tzarach shir, v'hai command de michsas shiures. So let's listen to this. When Moshe Rabbeinu, when Klal Yisrael went into Eretz Yisrael, ideally it was supposed to be under the leadership of Moshe. Then when it comes to the leadership of Yoshua, there was a din of destroying avodah zarah. So when the Mishnah says you cannot use the lulav of an Asherah tree or of an Asherah tree, it was talking about the Asherah of the times of Moshe, where there was a biblical obligation to destroy avodah zarah. So what's the issue? The chesuse michsas shiure. Because we'll see, here's what's interesting. An avodah zarah, therefore the branch of let's say the lulav of an Asherah tree, if the Asherah is only to be destroyed, right? If it's designated to be destroyed, it's as if it is already halachically destroyed, and if it has been halachically destroyed, it lacks the requisite shear. It lacks the requisite shear. That's what I mean. So we'll say this is fascinating. So what's wrong with using the lulav of an Asherah tree? You see, you would have thought that at the end of the day, it should be asur. Why? It should be asur because you're being nana from avodah zarah. Now Rashi points out that there's no problem of hana over here. Why is no problem of hana? Look at Rashi, not all kosher. Va'afagab di suri hanohi the mitzvahs lav lehanos nitnu. Kilomar ein ki of mitzvahs hanas haguf ela avodas eved rabo. We'll say this is incredible. The performance of a mitzvah is not considered hana. It's not considered a benefit. Right? This is incredible because the Rashi says mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu. The mitzvos were not given to me as a form of benefit or enjoyment, but rather mitzvos are a form of service. So this is incredible. So that's why Rava says, ideally you're not supposed to use the lulav of an Asherah tree. But if you did use the lulav of an Asherah tree, you're yotzei. You just got hana from avodah zarah, and you're not permitted to get hana, you're not permitted to get a benefit from avodah zarah. Mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu. A mitzvah is not hana. A mitzvah is service. Shabbos, if you think about it, is such a dramatic way to look at our Yiddishkeit. Because so often when we think about our Judaism, we think about the things we like, the things we don't like, right? So I'm going to do this because I enjoy this. I'm not going to do this because I enjoy it a little bit less or I don't enjoy it at all. The Gemara is, mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu. In Yiddishkeit, it's not about what you do enjoy or what you don't enjoy. It's not about what appeals to me or what doesn't appeal to me, what speaks to me or what doesn't speak to me. Mitzvos are a service. Mitzvos are a service. And to be honest, just like in any job, there hopefully are things about your job that you love and probably things about your job that you would give anything to change, but it's all part of the job. Mitzvos are our job. Mitzvos are our service. There are some that we like, some that we don't like so much, but it's all part of the job. It's all part of the avodah. It's all part of the service. Therefore, again, what's the problem with you? If that's the case, that there's no problem of hana, right, from avodah zarah, when performance of mitzvahs, because mitzvah is not hana, why can't I use a lulav of an Asherah? It's very simple, because it halachically lacks the requisite shear. We'll discuss that a lulav requires a minimum shear. The lulav of an Asherah tree doesn't have the shear. But it does have the shear. I just measured it as the shear because it's only to be destroyed. Therefore, halachically, it lacks the requisite shear. An incredible idea. To which the Gemara says, Dumya Dirani Dachas. It compares the lulav of an Asherah tree to the Irani Dachas. Ultimately, just like in Irani Dachas, what happens in the Irani Dachas? Everything has to be destroyed. Everything has to be destroyed in Irani Dachas. Therefore, again, so too the lulav of the Asherah tree cannot be used because since it has to be destroyed, then what? It lacks the requisite shear. An incredible idea. Even though physically it has the shear, it measures whatever, 3 tvach and 4 tvach, whatever lulav is going to have to be, because halachically it has to be destroyed. It's as if it lacks the actual requisite physical shear. And we'll say that is indeed the halacha l'maisa. Again, interestingly enough, we learn at 2 things. Number 1, that you shouldn't use the lulav from avodah zarah. But if you did b'diavad, it sounds like it works. What about getting hana from avodah zarah? Mitzvos lav lehanos nitnu. The performance of a mitzvah is not considered hana because mitzvos are not given to us for our enjoyment, for our benefit, but not for our enjoyment. But again, the asherah of the times of Moshe Rabbeinu, where avodah zarah had to be actively destroyed and uprooted, such a lulav can be considered to lack the requisite shear. Beautiful. Niktam Rosho. So the next part of the Mishnah was, what happens if the top of the lulav was snipped off? Right, top of the lulav was cut off. So ultimately the Mishnah says the lulav is pasul. So Rav Huna, lo shan ela niktam. That's only true ultimately again if it was cut off. Aval nistak, but what if it was split? What if the top of the lulav was split? Kasher. Ultimately, the lulav will still be kosher. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, nistiku rashei alim. If, let's say, the tops of the leaves were split, so the lulav will still be kosher. So the Gemara says, really? Nista kosher? Is that true? That if the top of the lulav was split, the lulav still remains kosher? Vatanya, we learned, lulav kafuf. If you have a bent lulav, and we'll say also, I sent out on the WhatsApp chat the other pictures, just the basic Gemara pictures, which you could do, which are also helpful in this case. But again, I'm going to reference you to some of the pictures in the copies I gave you. So lulav kapov, if a lulav is bent, or kavatz. Now Rashi says over here, kavatz is shiyotzin b'shedra shalo uktzin kamin kotzin. So according to Rashi, kavatz means the lulav has thorns which come out of it. Now Tosis disagrees. Tosis says that kavatz is like a zigzag. So we'll say, does everybody have a copy of what I Xeroxed this morning? If you don't, maybe just share with someone next to you. But just to give you an idea as to what Tosis says over here, if you take a look, this is on page 57 on the Xerox copy. I'll hold it up over here also for the. It's this picture over here. According to Tosis, this is kavatz. Kavatz means there's like a zigzag on it. Again, I'm gonna put it out on the WhatsApp chat to Miraz Hashem later on today. So that's the zigzag. So the Gemara says, again, we'll discuss this in just a little bit as well. But we'll go with Rashi right now, that kavatz ultimately means thorn-like protrusions. Or the Gemara says saduk. So saduk again ultimately is split. So do akum doma lamagal pasul. If it is bent like a sickle, it's going to be pasul. So all of these cases, right? So if it's akum doma, it's going to be pasul. Charus pasul. If it's charus, it'll also be pasul. Now what's charus? Look at Rashi. Rashi says charus kasha shenaase charios shekein derech halulav alav nosha mimas agasham v'ashishim kasha. But say charus means if the lulav becomes hardened. If the lulav itself is hardened, then it becomes charus pasul doma lacharus. Now we'll say doma lacharus means the lulav is beginning to harden, but has not yet fully hardened. It will be kosher. Amra Papa. So we'll say, so which one is it? So you just said over here that Allah Chalamaisa, you said before that nistak, if the lulav splits, right? If the leaves split, the lulav is kosher. Here you just said to me that what? That if the lulav splits, it's pasul. So which one is it? Amra Papa, it's not a contradiction. It depends how it splits. Amra Papa, da'avit kehemnik. Oh, we'll say, watch this. This is fascinating. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, Shalbarzel, quotes over here, where your futziar Shalbarzel Sofrim, Sheyesh lo Shnei Rashim, Virosha Echad Mefutzal, Kach Godel Halulav Kamin Shtei Shedros, Machtis Alon Lekan, Umachtis Alon Lekan. So we'll say, so I'm going to show you. So if you go ahead, actually, let me just show you in the handout that I gave you. So just to show you what a hemnik is, if you take a look, this is page 63 in the handout I gave you. So I will say the nasis hemnik is the most common psul in a lulav. So remember, let me just say this outside first. Essentially, we're going to see in general, there is a major machlokes Sfardim and Ashkenazim about what level of split leaves go ahead and invalidate a lulav. According to the Mechaber, so for Sfardim, you have to have actually the majority of the leaves split in order for the lulav to become pasul, which is a lot of latitude. Ashkenazim are much more machmir, and for Ashkenazim, we look at the middle leaf, what we will call the tiomes, the middle leaf. If the majority of that middle leaf is split, the lulav is pasul. If the leaf is split, but it's not the majority of it, the lulav will be kosher. However, if the middle leaf is split in what we call kehemnik, kehemnik means, and again, that's the picture over here, you can see over here, where the middle leaf is split and almost it looks like a V. It looks like a V. So the split itself is clear. You look at it and the middle leaf looks, see I was saying, very often when the middle leaf is split, the only way you really know it's split is how? When you look at it, and then if you were to, you can see you can pull it apart. That's kosher, as long as it's not split more than half the way down the middle leaf. But if it's hemnik, in other words, when you look at it, it looks like two leaves. It looks like two leaves. It's page 61 in the handout that I gave you. Right? And it looks like two leaves. So literally it looks like a V or it looks like a Y. Right? That's a psul. That's the psul kehemnik. And this is a very common psul in lulavim. Perhaps one of the most common psulim in lulavim. So the Gemara goes like this. Therefore, that's the distinction. So could the middle leaf be split? And the answer is yes, as long as it's not split more than 50% of the way down. But halacha l'maisa, if it has the appearance of being split right into two, then ultimately the lulav will be pasul. So the Gemara goes back to akum doma l'magal. So furthermore, again, if it's bent like a sickle, it's also going to be pasul. So also I said the Gemara says amar Rava lo amar ela lefanov. That's only true if the lulav is bent forward. So just to orient ourselves with the lulav a little bit, right? So remember again, a lulav has two sides. So there's one side that's green, right, where you see the thickness of the shedra, the thickness of the spine, and then there's the opposite side, which is usually a bit more hollow, right, and usually has some of the brown on it, the kora on it. So we're talking about now, remember, you hold the lulav with, we'll call it the greener part towards you, the thickness of the shedra towards you. So when do we say ultimately again, Amar Rava said, when is the lulav ultimately again going to be pasul? Lefanav, when it's bent forward. Aval la'acharav, but if your lulav is bent a little bit backwards, kibriyasu. Ultimately, again, that's often the way lulavim actually grow. That's actually considered to be somewhat normal. Now again, obviously, if it's noticeably bent, the lulav is going to be pasul. But lamaisa, if it's slightly bent towards you, that's actually the normal way that a lulav grows. Amrav Nachman, litstadin kilafanav dami. What if the lulav is bent to the side? So ultimately, Rav Nachman says, if it's bent to the side is like being bent forward, and therefore will be pasul. Others say no, it's like it's bent backwards. Another psuah will say, if you have a lulav that only has leaves on one side. So remember again, I wish I had a lulav to demonstrate this with, because it would have been much better. See, this is how I was living Gullus, right? In Eretz Yisrael, you could always grab a lulav, or I guess in Florida or California also, but they're not as good. So I'll say, so again, if you could imagine, you have the lulav, you have the shedra, which is the thick green part in the middle. If you were to have leaves only growing out of one side, that would be a psul. So both say, so the halacha l'maisa, what comes out of here is as follows. Again, we're going to go with Ashkenazic practice right now. So what we look for the kashrus of the lulav is to make sure that middle leaf is closed. Ideally, you want the middle leaf that it's fully closed. If the middle leaf is open, if it's less than 50% of the way open, now remember when we say 50%, that middle leaf doesn't go all the way down to the bottom of the lulav. That middle leaf goes to like the base of the shedra, the base of the spine, which is usually somewhere like midpoint of the lulav. You check that middle leaf. If that middle leaf is fully closed, grab that lulav. That's a good lulav, right? If the middle leaf is open, as long as it's less than 50% open, that's okay. With one exception, if it's kehemnik. If the top part of that middle leaf is clearly split to the point that the two leaves, because remember again, the middle leaf is a double leaf. That's why we'll see in a moment that middle leaf is called the tiomes. If that middle leaf, the top of that middle leaf is split and the tops go in two different directions, even if it's only a tiny little split and the majority of the leaf is closed, that lulav is pasul. So the Gemara goes weiter. Nifritzu alav. We'll get to this. I actually, it's in the packet that I gave you. There's a whole discussion on whether or not halach l'maisa you're permitted to glue together the middle leaf. Can you glue together the middle leaf to go ahead and make it a whole leaf? Yeah, well, when in our halach l'maisa show, we'll talk about that. Nifritzu alav. So we'll say if the leaves were torn off, the lulav is pasul. Amar Papa nifritzu da'avid ki chofya. So we'll say Rav Papa says the case of nifritzu is when the leaves were, let's say, torn off, and then you reattach them like a broom. People would often make palm branch brooms, right? You can make a broom out of a lulav. How would you do that? You would have the individual pieces, you tie them together. So if you're to do that for your lulav, it does not work. Nifridu, the ifrud ifrude. So we'll say the case of nifridu is where the leaves begin to branch out. Remember again, if you leave a palm branch, if you take a lulav and you were to leave it on the tree, what would happen over time is what? The smaller leaves, right, which make up the lulav, would begin to separate out, right? Would begin to, what's the right word? Spread out. Would begin to spread out, right? And ultimately they harden that way over time as well. That's the case of nifridu. So interestingly enough, nifritzu, if the leaves come off and you reattach them, that's a pasul lulav. Nifridu, however, if the leaves begin to separate, the lulav could still be kosher. Now remember, we saw in the Mishnah, what would you do if the leaves begin to separate? You bind them back together, and that lulav would still be kosher. By Rav Papa, nechloka tiyomes mahu. So Rav Papa asks as follows, what happens if the tiyomes? Rabbi said the tiyomes is the middle leaf of the lulav. Why is it called the tiyomes? Rashi says, lefi shemidubakim kitaomim. Because they're stuck together like twins. In other words, the middle leaf is a twin leaf made up of two smaller leaves. So look at Rashi, nechlakat yomes, shnei olin al yonim emtsoim, sheshama shedra kala, nechlaku zemizeh, v'nistaka shedra ada olin shlamad. So we'll say, what happens if the tiomes, the middle leaf, splits? So now, tashma da amar Rabbi Yochanan Yoshua ben Levi, nitla hatiomes pasul. If the tiomes was removed, let's say you cut out the middle leaf of the lulav, pasul. The lulav will be pasul. My love, nechlaka. Is it not the same halacha if the middle leaf was split? Right? Perhaps being split is the same thing as being removed. Lo, nitla shiny. Nitla is different. Why? Daha chaserle. Because ultimately, we'll say if the middle leaf is missing, it's missing. Missing is much more significant than just split. Naaseh Kamisha Nidla Tiomes Upasal. Rishonim Levi says that if the tiomes is split, it is made as if the tiomes is removed and the lulav will be pasul. But again, piggybacking on what we said before, it's true. If the tiomes, if the middle leaf is split, the lulav is pasul. But only if it's split, how much? How much? How much? More than 50%. Right? More than 50%. If the middle leaf is split more than 50%, we'll say that's why, again, when picking your lulav, again, there are a lot of details. You want to make sure the lulav is not white. That's the case of Yavish, although that's very uncommon that a lulav would be white, unless, of course, it's left over from last year. Right? So, again, generally not going to run into a situation like that. But when you check a lulav, the thing you're checking most is that middle leaf. You're going to go to the shedra, to the spine, which is the thick green part. You're going to trace that middle leaf. You're going to see that middle leaf is a double leaf. You're going to trace that all the way to the top of the lulav. And what you're looking for is to make sure that that middle leaf is not split. Even if it's split, as long as it's not more than 50% split, you're good to go. Assuming that what? What's the one more thing you have to look for? Hemnik, right? You have to look for the top to make sure that there's not a V or a Y, however you want to look at it, at the top over there. Good. Rabbi Huda says. So remember again, Rabbi Huda said in the Mishnah. What did Rabbi Huda say? Rabbi Huda said, Yogdenu milamala. Rabbi Huda says you should go ahead and tie the lulav on top. Tanya, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Tarfon, kapos tamarim, kafos. V'mhaya parod yikasvenu. Shabbos Rabbi Huda darshins, the way the Torah refers to lulav is kapos tamarim. Right? So Rashi says, so Rabbi Huda says it also means kafos. Right? But kafos, you have to go ahead and bind the lulav together. Right? A little bit of a play on words. Kapos, kafos, same word. It tells me that what? That Allah if the lulav is splitting at all, if it's splitting at all, right, or separating at all, you should bind it back together. Amrli Ravina Ravashi. Mimai dahai kapos toram dululavahu. So we'll say, here's what's interesting in general about the Daled Minim, right? The Torah is not explicit about what item is what. For example, I know that Arvei Nachal are willow branches. I know that Anaf Eitz Avos, this is going to be tomorrow's daf, is going to be Hadassim, myrtle branches. But for example, Esrog, we saw this in yesterday's daf. How do you know that Esrog is Esrog, right? It just says pre-Eitz Hadar. How do you know that Kapos Tamarim means a lulav, a palm branch? How do you know that? So the Gemara says, how do you know that a Kapos Tamarim is a palm branch from a lulav, from a palm tree? Ema charusa. Maybe it's a charusa. And I will say, what's charusa? Maybe it's the hardened palm branch. In other words, maybe it's not like what we take as a lulav, which is the shaky palm branch. Maybe it's a hardened palm branch, to which the Gemara says, but inon kafus veleka. We need it to be the type of branch that ultimately has the ability for its leaves to separate. In other words, the fact that it says kafus, we said it could be bound together. The only time you'd have a need to bind something together is if what? If the individual leaves could separate. But if it were to be hardened, then there would be no possibility of separation. Ve'ima ofsa, maybe it's a log. Maybe it's just a log. You take a little log, a logala, right? Not a big log, but a little log, right? For your lulav and esrog. So kapos michlal diika paras. Same idea. The fact that it says kapos, bound, indicates us that it has the ability to separate. V'hai kapos va'omed liolam. But if it's a log, the log, so to speak, is already bound, it's already hardened. Ay ve'ema kufra, maybe it's a shoot. In other words, how do you know that it's a whole branch? Maybe it's just a shoot from the palm tree. Amar Abaye, listen to how beautiful this is. Amar Abaye, teracheha darchinam b'chol nesivo se'ah shalom. Let's say this is beautiful. So Abaye says the ways of the Torah are pleasant. Meaning what? The shoots of palm trees often have thorns on them. So the Torah Kedosha would never tell us to take something thorny for Yom Tiv. The ways of the Torah are peaceful, right? So beautiful, are pleasant and peaceful. So any mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to tell us to perform at the end of the day, always is going to be pleasant, going to be beautiful. Which will say something so important because everything in Yiddishkeit is beautiful and pleasant. And very often, if it's not beautiful and pleasant, sometimes the problem is not the mitzvah, but sometimes the problem is me. Right? Sometimes the problem is the way I relate to it, or the way I'm viewing it. But everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us, it's not always easy. But lamaisa deracha darchinam b'chol nesivo se'ah shalom. It's always filled with shalom, and it's always filled with noam. So incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar le ravato svala ravina ve'ema tarti kapi de tamri. This is great. Maybe kapos tamarim means 2 clusters of dates. I will say, can you imagine walking into shul like this? Right? Everybody walks in. And again, by the way, kapos tamarim. Everybody should bring 2 clusters of dates. First of all, it's great if shul goes long, right? You mamish, you have a little something to nash on. It's fantastic, right? You imagine everybody walks in with 2 clusters of dates on Sukkis. Kapos ksiv, to which the Gemara says, it's true it says kapos, but it says kapos without the vav, which is chaser, which tells me that I'm only taking 1. Ay ve'ema chada. So why don't we go ahead and just, maybe it means take 1 cluster of dates. The Gemara says, lahu kaf karile. Interesting enough, 1 cluster of dates would be called a kaf, not a kapos. So I'll say, interestingly enough, through this whole exercise, we begin to see kapos tomorrow means the branch of a date palm, but not one that has hardened, one that has the ability to be bound. When does something have to be bound? Ultimately, again, when its leaves have the ability to separate, but have not yet separated. Incredible. Sine har barzel kshera. The Mishnah then said that a lulav that comes, lulavim, from har barzel, right? Palm trees of har barzel are kosher for the use of lulav. Says the Gemara, Amra Abaye, lo shanu ela, sherosha shazeh magil tzad ikaro shazeh. Aval in rosho shazeh magil tzad ikaro shazeh. Puzzle. Shabbos say, here's what's interesting. Apparently, from this Gemara, you see that what was unique about Sinei Har Barzel, they had shorter leaves. So we'll say, if you look at a lulav, right? If you look at our lulavim, the leaves overlap, right? Apparently, these Sinei Har Barzel had shorter leaves, and the leaves did not really overlap. So the Gemara says, when can you use a lulav from Har Barzel? only if one leaf, only if literally again, roshel shalzeh, magio letzad ikaro shalzeh. Only if the bottom leaf, the top of the bottom leaf, touches the base of the upper leaf. So, in other words, whereas in a normal lulav, the leaves themselves overlap, right? You have layers of leaves, one on top of the other. Sini har barza, the leaves were a little bit shorter. You could use it as long as the leaves touch one another. Touching as defined, the top of the bottom leaf touches the base of the upper leaf. However, abal in rosh shazeh magil tzadikar shazeh pasul. But if halacha lemaisa, the leaves are so disconnected that the leaves of the top of the bottom leaf does not touch the base of the upper leaf, such a lulav would be unusable. That supports this as well. Sini har barzel psula. Brisa says you cannot use a lulav from har barzel. Ai vahanan tinan kshera, but we learned sini har barzel is kosher. El shmamina ka abaye shmamina. Rather, you have to. It's like Abaye's distinction. As long as for lulav of har barzel, that the leaves connect with one another, meaning that the tip of the bottom leaf touches the base of the upper leaf, then ultimately it's going to be kosher. Amar beis, v'ika diramile mirma. Others go ahead and pose this as a contradiction or as a kasha. Tanan, sini har bar. I will say it's the same discussion, just reframed as a kasha. Sini har barzel kosher. Our Mishnah said that you could use lulavim of har barzel. That's a location. Kosher. I v'tanya psula. But learn a brisa that lulavim that come from har barzel apostle. Amar Abaye lo kasha. Kan sherosho shalzeh magia letzad ikaro shalzeh. Kan shein rosho shalzeh magia letzad ikaro shalzeh. But let's say it's not a contradiction. There are two different types of lulavim which grew on the palm trees of har barzel. Sometimes the leaves did not even touch one another. Such a lulav will be pasul. But if you had it seen har barzel, lulav from har barzel, where again the tip of the bottom leaf touched the base of the upper leaf, ultimately again that is going to be kosher. And I will say here in the distinction one more time. In our lulavim, and again sometimes we don't pay attention to these. In our lulavim, the leaves all overlap. They all overlap, right? In Tzini har barzel, the leaves did not overlap. They were shorter leaves. They did not overlap. So the Gemara says it's kosher as long as the leaves are connected to one another. How do we define connection? That the top of a bottom leaf touches the base of the lower leaf. Beautiful. So the Gemara goes, Amra Marion, Amra B'Shem Levi, V'amilei Tanan Rabba Baramari, Mishum, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Say, listen to this. Shtei Tamaros Yesh Begai Ben Hinnom. There are two palm trees. There are two palm trees in the valley of Ben Hinnom. And smoke comes out from between those two palm trees. And this is what we were referring to when we said before, that the palm trees of har barzel. So we'll say this is incredible, because the one thing we did not know is where are the palm trees of har barzel? Where's har barzel? To which the Gemara says, har barzel is actually not a har at all. It's not a valley. What is it? I'm sorry, it's not a mountain. What is it? It's a valley. And where is it? Right outside of Yerushalayim. Right outside Yerushalayim. I will say, in fact, if you go on the Tayelet, right, if you go on the promenade right by Yerushalayim, you could see the valley of Ben Hinnom. The valley of Ben Hinnom is where these palm trees grew. And these were two specific types. It was two. The Gemara refers to two palm trees. Shtei Tamaros, in the valley of Ben Hinnom, there was smoke that went out from between the valleys. And ultimately, why is there smoke coming out between the palm trees? V'zohi pischa shel Gehenna. And one of the entranceways to Gehenna was in this valley of Ben Hinnom, right outside of Yerushalayim. So I will say, there's so much to speak about on this. And because it's 8:53 and we have all the time in the world, we could really delve into this incredibly. So I'll give you the 30-second version of this. So I will say, this is incredible on a number of ways. First of all, the Meshech Chachma says, what happened over here that this is an entranceway to Gehenna and that the smoke comes out? The Meshech Chachma says something absolutely amazing. This valley right outside of Yerushalayim, before Klal Yisrael came and conquered Yerushalayim, because remember, we don't conquer Yerushalayim until later, the times of David HaMelech. Even under Yoshua, the Yevusi still lived in Yerushalayim. David HaMelech was the one who cleared out the Yevusi from Yerushalayim. This area, right outside Yerushalayim, was the capital of the Avodah Zarah of Molech. Right? Molech, I will say, was the Avodah Zarah of child sacrifice. Right? So the central place, the central, like the Beis HaMikdash, Lahav the Elef Alpei Rive Abdallas, for Molech was in the valley of Ben Hinnom. The worst type of Avodah Zarah happened right outside of Yerushalayim in this valley. That's why this valley gained this notoriety. That's why the smoke, right? The smoke literally of the Avodah Zarah still smoldered here. So we'll say, but why is this interesting to Gehenna? So you see something amazing. You see something that when we engage in negative activity, mamish, doesn't just have an impact on the person who does it, but negative activity has an impact on the makom as well. You could fundamentally change the spiritual fabric of a makom through negative activity as well. And there is no place that is more sensitive to this than Eretz Yisrael. This is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, if we don't behave correctly, Succah Aretz Eschem, the land throws us out. The land vomits us out. Eretz Yisrael, the greater the Kiddush, the greater the sensitivity. So it's incredible. Again, there's so much more to say about this. Remember, again, we did this Suggah in Eruvin. Remember? Good. Just tell me you remember. It'll make you feel much better. Just shake your head. Oh, good, incredible. He'll say, so again, we did this Suggah already, but I just want to point out, this is the German. So where's Tzine Har Barzel? It's not a har. Why it's called a har is a whole discussion. It's not a har. It's right outside of Yerushalayim in the valley of Ben Hinnom. There were these unique palm trees. Smoke used to come up from these palm trees. This was an entranceway of Gehenna. What happened in this place that it was an entranceway in Gehenna? Ultimately, again, because of Molech. But I will say what I also will point out, then we must go on. I'll also point out something amazing, which is, isn't it fascinating that there's an entranceway of Gehenna not so far from where? From where? From the Har HaBayis. Let's say, Kiddusha, Gan Eden, right? Gan Eden and Gehenna are two sides of the same coin. Wherever there's the greatest amount of Kiddusha, there's also the greatest capacity, ultimately, again, for Tumah. Wherever there's the greatest capacity for Gan Eden, ultimately, again, Gehenna is never far away. This is learned from Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov and Esav were in the same womb. Rav Kook, whose yarzheit is Gimel Elul, right? So Rav Kook, Rav Amisrael Kohen Kook, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kadlich Levracha says, Kedusha and Tumah, you're always going to find them in the same place, and they're always vying. There's always a struggle. Who is going to win? They're always, wherever you find one, you're always going to find the other. So you have a Beis HaMikdash, a couple of feet away, you're going to find the Pisla Shilganim, an incredible yisod. Weiter, quickly. Lulav Shish Bol Shlosha Tfachim. So if the lulav has 3 Tfachim, ultimately, again, the lulav is going to be kosher. That's the shir for lulav. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, shir hadas v'amrav shlosha v'lulav arba. That's not true. The shir for lulav, the shir for hadasim and aravas is 3 Tfachim, and lulav is 4 Tfachim. Because the lulav must extend 1 tefach above the hadas. Now, I will say, we're not going to get to do the halacha lamaisa in this sugya, but in the handout that I gave you, you could see this entire sugya on page 67. Page 67 is going to give you the shiurim of lulav and the relationship between hadas. Because remember, this is very important, I will say, because often people don't realize this halacha. Well, let's finish, then we'll finish up. So the Gemara says, lulav yotzim min hadas tefach. Rabbi Parnach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, shedro shalulav, the shedra, the spine of the lulav, sarach sheyetze min hadas tefach. There must be at least 1 tefach of spine, of shedra of the lulav, which extends above the hadasim. Tnan, we learned, lulav sheish bo gimel tfachim. If a lulav has 3 tfachim, kedei lena'anea bo kosher. The lulav has 3 tfachim, that's enough because there's enough to shake. But 1 second, is lulav 3 tfachim or is lulav 4 tfachim? Ema u kedei lena'anea bo kosher. No, what it means is the lulav must have, in addition to the 1 tefach told, it must have an additional 3 tfachim to go ahead and shake it. Markidi islay markidus. And I will say that there's a machlokes. Does it just have to be that you have 1 tefach of any part of the lulav that extends above the hadasim, or do you need a part of the shedra, a part of the spine of the lulav, to extend above the tefachim, extend above the hadasim? That's the machlokes. Tashma, shir hadas v'arava shlosha, the shir for hadasim and aravos is 3 tefachim, the lulav arba, and the lulav must have a minimum shir of 4 tefachim. My love, bahade alin. Does that not come to including the branches themselves? Lo levad me'olin. Ultimately, again, it means independent, ultimately, again, of the branches of the hadassim. So gufa, let's analyze. First, I'm going to go quickly, then we'll explain. Gufa, shir hadas va'arava shlosha v'lulav arba. The shir for hadassim and aravos is 3 tfachim, and the lulav is 4 tfachim. Rabbi Tarfon Omer, ba'ama bas chamisha tfachim. So Rabbi Tarfon says, what are we talking about over here? With an amma that's measured by 5 tfachim. Amar Rava, Shari they murder Rabbi Tarfon. The Riva Mitzner should forgive Rabbi Tarfon for saying such a thing. Hashta avos shlosha lo meshkachinon. It's difficult enough to find hadassim which measure 3 tfachim. Bas chamisha miboik. You're gonna be able to find one that measures 5 tfachim. Kiyos Rav Dimi Amar. Amma bas shisha tfachim. No, the amma that we're using is an amma that is made up of 6 tfachim. Aseo bas chamisha, but take an amma that's made of 6 tfachim and transform it into an amma of 5 tfachim. In other words, redistribute it as if it was an amma of 5 tfachim. Semehen shlosha lahados. Take out 3 tfachim per hadasim. Bashar lulav, and the rest of that space, or the rest of that area, the rest of that measurement will be for a lulav. Kama havalahu. How much will we be left with? Tlasa utlas chumshi, 3 3/5. I kasha the Shmuel. So it's a contradiction. Shmuel's contradicting himself. What is the proper share of the lulav? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, shir hadas va'arava shlosha. The share for hadasim and aravas is going to be shlosha. V'hasam Amar Rav Huna Amar Shmuel, halach Rabbi Tarfon. But here, Rav Huna saying name Shmuel, the halach is Rabbi Tarfon. Different share, to which the Gemara says lo dak. Shmuel was imprecise with his measurements. Ema darmina lo dak l'chumra. When do we say that? When can you claim imprecision? That's only when your lack of precision leads to a chumrah. Ultimately, again, I'm sorry. Can you say lo dak that you were imprecise when it turns out to be a kula? To which the Gemara says, Ki asa Ravin Amar, Amma bas chamisha tvachim asay osa shisha. Really, what you should do is as follows: you take an amma that is measured by 5 tvachim and redistribute it as if you were measuring at an amma of 6 tvachim. Semehen shlosha lahados. Take out 3 of those tvachim for hadasim. Bashar lulav, and the rest will be for the measurement of lulav. Kama havi, how much will it be? So the Gemara says, Trey upalga, 2.5. Sof kasha the Shmuel. Isn't Shmuel still not contradicting himself? Lo dak. Ultimately, again, Shmuel was imprecise. V'hainu l'chumra. But now the imprecision ultimately again is l'chumra. To which the Gemara says, Shmuel halok Rabbi Tarfon. So both say, so bottom line, I'm sorry that I went quickly through that last sugya because of the time we have to. I'll say, but bottom line, you'll see again, if you look quickly at page 67 in that handout that I gave you, you can pretty much see here, Rabbi say, is the basic halacha, 67 and 68. What you can see, Rabbi say, is the minimum shear of a lulav is going to actually be 4 tfachim. 4 tfachim. The minimum shear for hadasim and aravos is going to be 3 tfachim. But the way it has to work, halacha l'maisa, is that when situating your hadasim and your aravos with your lulav, there must be at least 1 tefach of shedra, 1 tefach of spinal space, we'll call it spinal space, of the lulav that extends above the hadasim and the aravos. And that's page 68 in that handout that I gave you, the picture there. You see how that's arranged over there? You have the hadasim, and then you have that little bracket, which is the shedra of the lulav, 1 tefach of spinal area, lulav spinal area, that extends above the hadasim. And I both say, why is this very important? Because often we mess this up a little bit. Because many of us use those holders, those holsters, right? And what happens? Everybody's always reticent to push their hadasim down into the holsters, and rightfully so, because halacha l'maisa, you could end up shaving off the leaves, which is going to be tomorrow's sugya. So often what ends up happening is, my hadasim are very high on the lulav. The problem is now my hadasim are too high on the lulav. So we'll discuss how to appropriately remedy this. But again, the halacha l'maisa takeaway, lulav 4 tfachim, hadasim 3 tfachim, aravos 3 tfachim. Hadasim must be placed in by the lulav in a way that there is at least 1 tefach of the shedra, 1 tefach of the thickness of the spine above the hadasim. Mirat Hashem will continue tomorrow. Shkach Avosai. Yeah, nice to see you. Hatzlacha Rabba.